Hello, everybody, and welcome to the sixth episode of CelebWorx Live series Yojo Raps, where we get all our stock advice from Snake Eyes. Yojo Raps is an inside look into the iconic series of G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero. I'm Christopher Arsaga.
And I'm Nery Lemus. Thanks for joining us on our new inside look, where knowing will no longer be half the battle.
And to the general public, if you have any G.I. Joe questions or really any questions in general for our special guest or for Nery and I, please post them on our official stream and we will answer them if we can.
I'm excited to bring on this actor and client to the program. Keone Young is an actor and voice actor best known for his roles as Storm Shadow in the G.I. Joe animated series, Mr. Wu in HBO's Deadwood, Jun Sato in Star Wars Rebels, Silver Samurai in Wolverine and the X-Men, Kaz Harada in Hi Hi Puffy Amiyumi, Dr. Takahashi in HBO's True Blood, Grandpa in American Dragon Jake Long, Mr. Sanban in Codename Kids Next Door, Zhang Zhang in Avatar The Last Airbender, Hardmaster in G.I. Joe Renegades, Mr. Wu in Nickelodeon's The Mighty Bee, and multiple appearances in Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, and Star Trek Enterprise. He's got a long list of other credits that include Return to Halloween Town, the Crank franchise 1 and 2, Sons of Anarchy, Men in Black, Challenger, he was the Bob Aram and Surf Ninjas, as well as Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. He has made numerous guest appearances on television series such as Different Strokes, The Golden Girls, Murphy Brown, Mad About You, Family Matters, Futurama, The Simpsons, Alias, Jag, Steve Harvey Show. He has made appearances on daytime soap operas such as The Young and the Restless, Generations, and General Hospital. I'm proud to call him a client as well as a friend. Please welcome our client, Keone Young, to the program.
Yay!
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey, before we start, I want to shout out to my buddy on the East Coast, Larry Hama.
Yeah, Larry.
Who I've known since 1976, before we did G.I. Joe. I just want to say hello to the brother, and thank you for everything, Larry. Love you.
Everybody loves Larry.
Everybody loves Larry, and I'm sure we'll be talking about him shortly. But Keone, let me start off. How are you? How are you handling the quarantine?
You know, it's not bad for me. I'm like, I was raised in the country, so all we did was like stay in the house at night, go out with our transistor radios, listen to doo-wop, look at the stars, listen to cows moo, and like days turned into weeks and weeks turns into years, and there's like it doesn't bother me a bit. I don't know why people are going crazy, like I kind of like it. Kind of reminds me of the old days. Of course, in the old days, nobody had TV. We had radio, and you were fortunate if you had a transistor.
And it's so funny. I guess you're right. I mean, we're very privileged nowadays, and it's one of those things that, I think I just miss the social interaction between people, but I just don't get the same when we're doing sort of a FaceTime call or something like that. I don't think it's the same. I think that's why people feel cooped up.
Yeah, but I mean, living in the country, your next door neighbor was like a half mile away from you. Right. And you never made a phone call unless it was like an emergency, So it was like sometimes you wouldn't see people for days.
Well, hopefully some of the people that are out there and cooped up are watching some of your most iconic shows and TV appearances. Let me start off with that. You began your career on screen. You had roles such as in Room 22, 222, The Bill Cosby Show, Search, The Streets of San Francisco. Can we talk a little bit about the beginning of your career?
Well, yes. I came up at the end of the studio system. They were just getting rid of that. They still had some of it over like at Screen Gems and stuff like that. And I had come over when I was 17 to study acting. When I was a kid, I did not know what I wanted to do. My counselors were going to my mother saying, he's really not college material. He should go to trade school and find a trade. And my mother was really like, she was like disappointed because, of course, she wanted me to be a lawyer or a doctor. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And I got this teacher who was I really loved. Her name was Grace McAllister. And like, this is in Hawaii, okay?
Yeah.
And this white lady just took to me and started teaching me about world literature and particularly about plays because she was my drama teacher.
Oh wow.
She made me read, she got me interested in reading like Edward Albee, Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller. And for any actor who's interested in acting or performing, you got to study that literature. And it was a great eye opener for me. So I fell in love with the theater. I came out here to be an actor with her support. And I must tell you, I don't know why this lady supported me, but she saw something in me. So she supported me as well as some other teachers I had. And I came out here to be a struggling actor. And when you're in Hollywood in my days, there was no political correctness. It was tough. I grew up with guys like Jack Nicholson, John Cassavetes, Bill Cosby. They were not nice people. They were, I mean, as much as people love them, they were tough. If you couldn't cut it, you were gone. And I was gone a lot of times until I had to learn, So like the shows you named, I worked on, but it was terror because you got one take, the star got one take, and the cameraman got one take. If you needed 2 or 3 takes on your shot, you were done. You wouldn't be invited back. And there was a lot of times I wasn't invited back. I was still green.
Yeah.
And in those days, in order to survive, like I said, there was no political correctness. And, I was this Asian American guy in the business. There's no parts for me. I wanted to be on Mod Squad so bad, but there was nothing for me.
Aw.
But, but no, I mean, really. So I had to, in order to survive, and I came out here with some guys, who wanted to be actors, and they didn't survive. But the way to survive in my days was to do everything. So we would do like try to get in soap operas, try to get in late night. I don't know if you remember in the old days, they had these late night soap operas called Mary Hartman.
Yeah.
Those were like late night soaps and get in local programming. We even got into game shows, tried a couple of my actor friends would portray themselves as contestants, get on the show. And my roommate won like $1,000 on password.
That's so cool.
So we did everything as an actor. So that's what happened. And I was speaking about game shows. I don't know if you remember Joker's Wild.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with the show.
Yeah, but there was this guy named Jack Barry who got banned from TV in the 50s because there was a big quiz show cheating scandal.
Right.
On shows like 21 and Tic Tac Toe. It was a big scandal how they gave him the answers because the shows were boring if you had a guy who like didn't know the answers.
Yeah.
So Jack Barry tried to regain himself in the industry. And I know this is getting off the topic of G.I. Joe, but I'm going to make it all come together. But I even was in his like little repertoire of actors who would try out these different game shows on the weekend. We come together and he'd have a game format and he would try it out. And we actors would pretend we were contestants and we would get $50 a day to do that.
Wow.
And $50 in those days was like great for a starving actor.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. So talking about all these roles, I trained and studied to fit into every pocket of the industry,
Can we talk a little bit about your studying? I mean, we have, we spoke to Michael Gray a few weeks ago. You had a student residency at the Pasadena Playhouse, I believe.
Well, the Pasadena Playhouse was an introduction. It was like I wanted to get in, get out, and get into the hard road of professionalism. And that was like it introduced me to like things like the history of theater, performance, and just like the basics. But I knew that the industry was a whole nother different hat to wear. So I came out here and I realized, well, not only realized, but people told me, hey, you ain't as good as you think you are just because you went to college. I know a lot of kids today going like, yeah, I got a master's in drama, from University of so and so. I go, okay.
Yeah.
Being a professional is totally different. So I had a mentor. His name was Mako, and a lot of your animated people would know him from. He played Uncle in Avatar.
He's Uncle Iroh in Avatar, and he's Aku in Samurai Jack.
Right. And he was my mentor and teacher, and he told me, hey, you're not as good as you think you are. You got to study. And this was in like the 70s.
Wow.
So I went to New York and I studied opera, I studied ballet, I studied musical composition and theory, I studied tap dance, I studied everything so that when I was called, I would be ready.
Smart. You prepared.
So my study was very deep, but at the same time, what I wanted to do was not only do, because I wanted to do Arthur Miller and Tennessee Williams and Edward Albee, but I found out they weren't going to cast me in those roles. So I wanted to develop stories about my history and my people. I grew up in Hawaii where there was a flux of immigrants coming through all the time, like Japanese, Chinese, Filipinos, Koreans, Vietnamese, and on, Samoans. And I wanted to recreate that. And I'm tying this all in with G.I. Joe because you have to understand during G.I. Joe, what happened was, well, don't forget, we had a whole civil rights movement in the 60s. The end of the Vietnam War came in 75. And there was this outreach to recreate characters in a real sense, not in a stereotypical sense.
Right.
So I remember when I was 11 years old, my father took me around the country because in the old days, in the 50s, that's what you did on holidays. You drove throughout the country. Well, from Hawaii, we flew to the mainland and bought a car, and my father took me through like 38 states. And I happened to walk into a movie theater and I saw a cartoon. And what happened, it was funny. It was a Disney cartoon, but there was a Japanese character, but it was done so stereotypically.
Right.
I was mesmerized by it, that aso bit, and I laughed, but at the same time, I was really hurt inside. And from then, it turned kind of dark in the sense of like cartoons for me in terms of performance. And as I grew older, I decided, well, I wasn't going to challenge those stereotypes. I was going to recreate for people, the people I grew up with, the first generation immigrants who did come to America and help build this country, and what they really sounded like. So Storm Shadow provided me a great venue to do that, because Wally Burr and the studios at the same time says, okay, we don't want to do these stereotypical things anymore. We want to capture reality. Now, I don't know if I'm making sense with you guys, but
no, we're on track.
But so Storm Shadow was very precious to me, not in the sense like everybody else, it was a cartoon, it was an animated, but I considered it a part of my history.
Yeah.
And
it completely makes sense because, I mean, everybody, I think that cartoon, you're right. Everybody was authentic in it. It wasn't like they wanted, just some like Frank Welker to, I mean, God bless Frank Welker, but they didn't want him to come in and do it. They wanted you to do it. So they want authentic sounding person, which is the way it should be. Shouldn't be any other way.
Well, not only authentic, but I could give it things that they might not have thought of.
Absolutely.
Not from that culture.
Right.
And so there were two things happening when I went in to do G.I. Joe. There was those who were part of the voiceover acting crowd, people like Frank Welker, B.J. Ward, Chuck McCann, Peter Cullen. Those were your professional voiceover people. But then there was guys like me who presented a different side of character building. And so I'm not like, let's say, a guy with like hundreds of voices, but I'm a guy who can recreate reality, the real voices of my people. Okay. Also, there was a bunch of young guys like at that time, Rob Paulson and Corey Burton, Greg Berger, who were like really young guys who were like going into that voiceover field that were really great. And I couldn't compete at all with these guys. I mean, they just were brilliant. And for me, Frank Welker was the epitome of like voiceover acting in a commercial way, but also voiceover acting in showing reality, you know, how real people felt.
Right.
So he combined the both for me. He was brilliant. And I found out, like I said, you know, I was working in the industry and it was tough for me. And people weren't nice. And I'm not kidding about it. Like Bill Cosby, I hated working with him. You know, because he was tough. He was brutal, you know? And but working with voiceover actors, I found a genuine sense of love for the craft, love for people.
Yeah.
And the voices that they were creating. And Frank was, and there's another guy who kind of like mentored me. His name is Don Messick. I'm sure you know Don.
Of course, Scooby-Doo.
Don was the original Scooby-Doo. But
absolutely.
He and Frank kind of like opened my heart out. Like I said, I had this dark vision of the industry, you know. But Frank and Don really were shining examples of really what my teacher told me, Mako, when I asked him, I said, Mako, how do I become a good actor, better actor? He says, well, you can learn the craft and you must learn all the sciences. He says, but you can never be a real good actor unless you're a good human being.
Wow. And talk about words to live by.
I didn't understand what that meant because, like, who doesn't think they're not good?
Yeah.
I mean, we all think, hey, I'm a good guy.
Right.
But really, what Mako was trying to teach me, I thought, and the thing that guys like Frank Welker and Don Messick have, and now guys like Rob Paulson and Corey Burton have, is that they are good people. And it's not about them, but it's about what's out there, the world.
Yeah.
So I have to relearning that. And it's hard for me because, like I said, I grew up in very tough times, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I remember coming into town and then telling me, go back, kid, you're never going to make it. There ain't no room for no Chinamen. And it was Chinese people telling me that, you know. It's like I met all these guys like Philip On, Key Luke, you know, and Richard Liu. And those are the guys I started working with. And they would say, kid, you can't make it in this industry. And
it just goes to show you.
Huh?
It just goes to show you that, you know, as long as you keep doing what you want to do, you'll get there at some point, you know?
Well, I was lucky I found good mentors and good teachers and good coworkers. Like I said, guys like Rob Paulson, Corey Burton, Greg Berger, Kevin Michael Richardson.
All great people too. All outstandingly great people.
Good people, Gray Delisle. You know, I
love Gray.
these are the people that support you through all your trials. They not only and Steve Bloom not only share with you your victories, but they support you when you lose, when you make errors, when you fail.
Lift you up.
So right, they lift you up when you're wrong. Let's say
Right.
when you make mistakes.
Right.
So I finally understood, and very late in life, that yeah, in order to be a good performer, you have to be a good person. Now that doesn't mean that everybody has to like you, because I don't think everybody likes me.
Well,
But
we
I
do.
mean,
That's all that counts.
well, I know I'm not a really. That's not my claim to fame. But I wanted to be the guy who was like, yeah, he's an asshole, but we need him.
Yeah, but here's the thing: you're also very respected, and being respected. If I mean, let's just say there are. I don't know anybody that doesn't like you, but let's say there are. Most of those people that don't, they're going to at least respect you. So I think that's really important too. As long as people respect you, it's
Well, like I said, there was no political correctness in
yeah,
our days. Okay, like working at GI Joe, it's like you're there or you're not. You know, you come, if you don't make it on time, somebody replaces your ass.
right. Of course,
Okay,
very
we're
cutthroat.
not we're not in a single booth where we treated like, like somebody brings you your coffee or anything. You're like, you go up to the room, you cut it or you don't cut it. If you don't cut it, Michael Bell's there going like, what are you
Michael,
doing wasting my time, kid? you,
you
you
didn't
know what
make
I mean?
that.
If
Well,
you didn't make it, Michael Bell would remind you and say, kid, you're wasting my time.
That's
you
funny.
know but
So
he was great. Michael Bell was great as well, but I mean, it was tough, and I was not in that club, like BJ Ward and Chuck McCann. They were much loved people. I had to fight my way in, and at the same time,
oh,
you know at the same time, like we would be in the booth, we would all sit around the table and we would record together. We wouldn't singularly record,
right. Now that
and
brings a great question. So how were you cast for the series? I know Wally Burr was the voice director for the show. How
Yeah.
were you cast?
well, this is funny because I had been working in Asian American theater. I had found, this was after the riots at Martin Luther King, after he got killed, assassinated. There was a push, like now, to respect uh, people of color.
right.
Okay, so there was this man named Jack Jackson who developed a place for people of color. It was called the ICC, which is the Community Center. I can't think of it now, but anyway, it was run by people of color. Was him, and Inner City Cultural Center. That's what it was. Yeah, and we all worked there. I remember Maya Angelou coming there, and Bea Richards, and what's the guy? What was Marshall, the guy who did Blackula, who was famous for that? You know
I'm
who I'm
not.
talking?
I'm not
He
sure
was
who you're
he was a
talking about.
voice on Transformers too. He was a black classical actor.
Uh,
Um,
I'm trying to remember. I'm
the
looking it
hot,
up real quick.
yeah.
Uh,
Um,
hold
but
on.
anyway,
William Marshall.
William Marshall, who was a
Yeah.
great actor, and so what was I saying? Yeah, I came up through there, and then I was doing like with Mako, who was building the first Asian American theater uh, group, the
Wow.
East West Players, and I was like the second generation, okay, um, of people, and I was working day and night. I mean, we take classes in the day, we do a play at night, and then we do like production work after the play. Like we sew costumes, we paint sets, we hang the lights. I mean, we did everything. And so one day I'm sitting in the office and I'm all by myself, and I get this call, and it's Wally Burr, and he goes, I don't know. He goes, but nobody can handle this character that we got. And I said, what's the character? And he said, Storm Shadow. And he's a ninja. I said, you know, Wally, I've been doing ninjas all my life because instead of playing cowboys and Indians, we would play, you know, ninjas or samurais,
Yeah,
you know, or karate guys, you know. That was our cowboys and Indians or cops and robbers. I
right.
said, I think I can handle it. So he brought me in, and that's how Storm Shadow got. Because Wally was very particular about the sound, and he's saying nobody is can handle this character. You
Yeah.
know.
When when I was young, you know, my family, we watched like Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee.
Hmm.
We loved those movies, and so when Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow were both, I mean, especially when Storm Shadow for me came into GI Joe, I was just over the moon. I was like, I love ninjas, like I love martial arts. So that kind of leads me to my next question. Was I, if I, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I recall, one time when we were sitting together, I remember somebody asked you if you had worked with Bruce Lee before.
Hmm.
Have you actually worked with Bruce? Did you get to work
Well,
with Bruce?
well,
Or maybe even cross paths or something?
what? Let me tell you what happened. Like I said, we did everything in order to survive in Hollywood. So when Bruce Lee came out,
Yeah.
this bunch of movies from Hong Kong were coming in, and people were selling DVDs and stuff. But they had been dubbed in Hong Kong, and in Hong Kong you had British.
British, yeah.
It was a British colony then. So you had all these guys talking like, "Hey, I'll meet you down to Wing Chun's factory, eh?" And like Americans were going like, "No, that ain't Chinese."
That's not Chinese.
You know, it sounded really awful. So we got hired to like redub the movies
Yeah.
into like English for Americans, but with a Chinese accent.
So this was
So,
the part of your Walla group, right? I think
right.
this yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, like I just did a whole bunch of stuff like that. And then there would be these Bruce Lee movies that we would have to like redub too. And then we even redubbed Bruce's voice because Bruce at one time, you couldn't understand what he was saying, you
Yeah.
know?
You know what? That's what I overheard you talk. Now I remember.
Yeah.
That's what I heard you talking.
There was a character in Enter the Dragon called Brathwaite, Mr.
Yeah,
Brathwaite,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
then he says, and Bruce says, "Have some tea, Mr. Brathwaite," and he couldn't say Brathwaite. He kept saying
Oh,
Brathwaite. So
I love that though. I think that's
so
amazing.
so a lot of times we had to go and redo his voice or retouch up his voice or what they call a sound alike.
Yeah.
So a bunch of us, we were kind of like an Asian crew, you know, who had worked together in Asian American theater, and we would do that kind of work.
Yeah.
But I was doing that kind of work, you know, like all the time, like, and we would get like $25, $50 to dub a film, you know,
Yeah.
these horror films from Korea and these horror films from China, but also at the same time, I don't know if you remember Conan the Barbarian
Yeah.
with Schwarzenegger.
Schwarzenegger. Yeah.
John Milius was a fan of Kurosawa,
Oh
you
wow.
know, and he saw the movie Seven Samurai, and if
Oh,
not, everybody should see that movie.
such a good movie.
It's a great movie, one of the greatest.
Yeah.
And he wanted all his battle scenes to sound like a Kurosawa film.
That's so cool.
So I get this call from John Milius, and he says, "You know, I heard that you do all these things, and he says, can you come in and talk to me?" And he showed me these pictures, and all these warriors were Arnold Schwarzenegger's buddies, or his like gym buddies. You know,
Right. Yeah.
they developed every muscle in their body except their voice muscle.
Yeah.
So when they would talk like that. You
Yeah.
know, so they would talk. Oh, yonder comes the evil one, and but so John was like, I don't know what to do. I need to. Can you give me a voice? So we had spent our lives imitating Toshiro Mifune. You
Yeah.
know, so I would give them my Mifune voice, and in battle we would get the you know.
That is so cool.
Just samurai screams, and I worked on that movie for about 2 or 3 days,
Wow.
doing all the battle sounds. Me and another guy, his name is Glenn Shin, who's no longer here anymore.
Oh,
And Glenn was not from that genre, but Glenn was a musician, and he could syncopate and dub voices really well, And so I said, Glenn, let me take care of the Asian shit. You take care of the other stuff. And so yeah, in Conan Barbarian, I play a lot of the muscle bound guys.
that's so cool. I
It's
love it so
amazing.
much.
So I've had amazing experiences like that because of it, you know.
You
Now,
know,
was
it's funny. Sorry, Nery, I have a
no,
quick
it's-
little interjection. It's funny growing up. I'm half Mexican. I'm exactly half Mexican and
Right.
Caucasian. And so in my family, like growing up, I mean, there was Spanish speaking and English speaking.
Yeah.
And you're talking about Bruce couldn't say Brathwaite.
Yeah.
And it makes me remember this. I don't remember who said this. At some point I heard this and I was like, this makes so much sense. Because I've never made fun of anybody because of their accent.
Yeah.
And somebody told me once, hey, remember, don't ever make fun of somebody that has an accent because remember, they know another language also.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
was like thinking,
Right.
man, that is so great. That is so perfect to tell people when
But
if you hear somebody make fun of somebody doing that, people out there,
yeah.
please take that, use it. I give you permission.
Well, what's funny is when people speak to you and they don't understand you, what they do is instead of try and speak your language, they just speak loud.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I said.
I said it's like, yeah, they don't have a problem hearing. They don't understand.
So, but in this term, in terms of like Walla, I did. That's how I got into Walla groups, and there was I don't know if people know what Walla is. I don't know what they call it now. They call it the atmosphere sound.
it's
Right.
basically if at a restaurant in the behind the scenes,
Right.
all the people talking in a restaurant. Yeah.
Right.
Well, in our days, we called that Walla because in the old days you couldn't say any words because if you said words, had to be paid. So you just stood around going like in a party scene, you'd be going wow, 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 wow. So they called it Walla. But the fascinating thing about that is I worked with a lot of great actors who were starting in the business. People like Phil Hartman, people like Robin Williams,
Wow.
and Robin was one show by himself. It's like, Robin, you take over, because he wouldn't let you talk. You'd go like, Robin, shut up. Let me talk. They're paying me too. But Robin would do every voice in the film,
That's amazing.
I know. And Phil Hartman was great.
I love Phil.
But the thing about Frank, when I work with Frank Welker, he amazed me, and he really made me think about, and I know people are going to say, how do I get into voice acting? Well, I was in a room once, and the producers, Frank, we have a sound of a rocking chair in the corner, and it's rocking. Can you recreate the sound? And Frank goes, is it wood? Is it an antique? How heavy is it? Is it made of metal? And
Yep.
he gave you 18 different rocking chair sounds. And I said, oh, man, I think I'm in the wrong business.
Yeah.
I better get out of here,
I can only imagine if you're a brand new voiceover and you come in and Frank's in there and then you just feel like that small. You're like, oh my God, I gotta work.
know.
This is what I got.
You get so intimidated. But let me just say, Frank would come up to me and he goes, hey, do you need an agent? Let me introduce you to my agent.
He's so great.
And he was very helpful. He was very kind. And I have nothing but good to say about a guy like that. I wish I could be like him, but I can't. I don't know why.
I don't think any of us can. I don't think there will ever be another Frank Welker.
Yeah.
Now, was it because of the Walla groups that you met Wally Bird? Is that how you met him?
No. Well, I met Wally because he called up my theater. I was there. I happened to answer the phone. And I said, Wally, I can do it. And I was broke at the time and I was hungry. What do you pay? I said, oh my God. They were like, I think scale in those days was like $97 or something like that.
Wow.
$97 a session. But it was really interesting because we were contained in the way we worked. We also supported each other. There was a guy, I don't know if you know Robert David Hall. I think he called himself David at the time, David Hall.
Yeah, he was from CSI. He's the coroner on on CSI, right?
Yeah, but David. Now we're in '83, but in '78, David had lost his legs in a accident.
Oh, right, that is who that is. Yeah.
So in those days, there was no handicap kind of like in your workplace, and we were on the second floor, and I remember guys carrying him up in his wheelchair up to the second floor, and then bringing him back down. I mean, that was a kind of camaraderie that there was. There was guys who like Kenny Holliday,
Kenny.
who was a brilliant actor. I saw him on off Broadway when I was in New York studying, and he was great. Then of course there was Arthur Burkhart,
Gotta love Arthur,
who was a classically trained actor as well.
Yeah.
So it was, but it was funny, It's like in those days, smoking was not prohibited, so people would light up in the studio and smoke, like no big thing,
Yeah.
So, but it was really a lot of different personalities, a lot of different experiences that I was fortunate to experience. So you can imagine, like, dealing with these people and then dealing with the stories. It was like, you didn't know what to focus on sometimes,
Right.
Speaking of personality, how much of your personality is ingrained in the character and vice versa?
Well, it is a lot of my past. Like I said, I wanted to tell the stories of my people, which is the stories of immigrants, which is the stories of people being marginalized in this country and fighting for respect. So all my characters are kind of like based on that concept. People who love their people and people who want recognition. So I thought Storm Shadow was proud of his culture, proud of his training, and perhaps he saw a higher thing when he turned from Cobra to a Joe.
Right.
Yeah. So it made a lot of sense for me, and then meeting Larry afterwards, just it made so much sense because Larry is a guy. I don't know if you know. He really he went to Vietnam as an Asian American soldier.
Yeah.
He was active in Asian American community on the East Coast. He studied martial arts, so he has a strong point of view himself, which is similar to mine. And so he was trying to write a character that had some foundations or fundamentals in what our society was going through at the same time, as far as being Asian, And I try to bring that to every character, like even Mr. Samban, or Kaz in Hi Hi Puffy Ami Yumi. I try to bring, or even Mr. Wu in Deadwood,
Yeah, Mr. Wu.
I try to bring it's myself, but it's myself via my grandfather or my uncles or my aunts, even, my grandma, how they would approach a problem, how they would figure out how to do something.
Right. One of the things I want to say, Keone, and it's a testament to who you are in your work, but whenever you're cast in a role, you break the typical Asian typecasting just by the knowledge that you bring to the role.
Well, I keep studying even today. I'm in my 70s, and I keep having to study. And now I realize all these voiceover people, like you had Brian Cummings on, I think last week, And he was,
Yeah.
those guys that are able to do it, like, there's this kid, Eric Bauza, and
Eric
they
is great.
they can do all kinds of voices. So I even am learning now to go into that area myself. And I was teasing like Rob Paulson. I said, yeah, I'm stealing a lot of your stuff, Rob. I said, only with a Chinese accent. I told him, yeah, I do. Yeah, I do Yakko and Pinky a lot, but with Chinese or Japanese accent. And he said, I don't care if you steal from me, man. It's an honor, which is
Oh,
like a
that's so
great
cool.
honor for him, to hear from him. And I steal a lot from Corey and Kevin Michael, who's like, and these are guys who are brilliant voice artists. I would never believe that I could even be on the same platform as them. But I can do stuff that they can't do,
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
No, go, Chris.
You mentioned just a second ago, Mr. Wu, and I'm sure everybody wants to hear about that because such a great character. How did you get the gig for Deadwood?
Well, let me tell you this, and this is going to sound really not too cool with some people. I knew that the character, people would like the character based on some very racial stereotypical thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to show reality of that stereotype, because stereotype is based on some reality,
Right.
but it's how you view it. So I wanted to use that stereotype and show the real person underneath. And when I went in to meet David Milch, and I saw the script, and my character had no line. He just walks in, carries a body, throws it into the pig pen. And I said, David, I said, listen, I said, if you're going to do a story about a Chinese guy making it in the Midwest, it's got to have drama and comedy,
Right.
tragedy, because life was hard for those people. They built the railroads, yet they never were given passes to ride the rails.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
So I said, you got to show that side. And I said specifically to him, I said, and this is kind of misogynistic, but this is the term we use in Hawaii. I said, whatever you do, I don't care if you cast me or not. Don't make Mr. Wu a panty. Which meant in Hawaii, which is a term we use in the 50s, meant don't feminize my character. And if most of our characters in the 50s and the 60s and today are feminized, and talking about Asian men,
Yeah.
And we're not. We're men. We built this country.
Yeah.
We built the railroads.
It's not authentic if they do that.
Yeah. We fought in your wars. We fought in all the wars. I mean, Larry was a Vietnam vet. Who was a specialist in munitions. And I know. And we had Chinese fought in the Civil War.
I do have a question. Do you think that they sort of feminize Asian Americans to sort of diminish any type of equality? Do you think that's intentional or unintentional or subconscious?
Well, I think it's like, on the other hand, they exoticize Asian women, as exotic dragon ladies,
right.
But what is behind all that? What is the truth about that? I wanted to show my mother, my grandmother, my people, the people in my community, the strength and the honesty and the integrity of my people. And, like I said, we were in the time of the struggle of the Vietnam War and the civil rights. So people were trying to be open, trying to go deeper. I remember in the time of the Vietnam War where Barry Goldwater said, to an Asian, a life is not as important as it is to an American. And that was totally corrupt thinking.
Wow.
He says, yeah, the Asians, they were asking, why were the Asians so successful? And he says, well, they don't consider lives as valuable as we do.
What?
Yeah. Barry Goldwater said that, and I was like, oh my God. When my uncle died in the war, doesn't he think that I felt as bad as an American would?
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, when I say dark, I mean those are the kind of dark thinking, and that's why I was hesitant to be on the show because uh, with me you have to take what is what
Yeah.
is reality. So, like in Mr. Wu, I wanted to show humanity in its finest and yet at its evil, at its worst, but
Right.
always with dignity. I don't know if you remember, there are moments when, like, even when Al talks to me, I look at him like, no, you don't underestimate me.
Right.
I don't underestimate you. When in the first scene, when he takes me out, he walks me down and he says, go out to the back, and he puts his hand on me, and I turn around and look at him like,
Yeah.
you know, and and Ian was such a great actor who would give as much as he would take as much as he could give. You know,
Wow.
if you gave it to him, he would respect that and make it work, make it something.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. That guy's
He is a great actor. I mean, and a giving actor. Like, I mean, I work with guys talking about like guys that were like not fun to work with. You know, I'd work with these stars and they would be like, tell him he can't do that to me.
what?
Uh, you know, it's like, tell him no, he should do that. And tell him, let me speak my lines because he's coming too close to stepping on my line. I'm going like, well, yeah, that's the way people talk,
Yeah,
fool.
sure.
you you know, but because that they were the lead or the star, they had to be presented in a certain way. Well, Ian would let you go and he would come back on top of you if he felt he needed to.
That's
Well, I was going to say that scene that you have in Al's office, you know, the iconic scene. I mean, a lot of that had to do with the crafting of you and Ian together.
Yeah.
You-
Yeah. Ian and I worked on that a lot, just he and I, because Ian likes to work, you know, like theater. He's a theater man. So he liked to work just me and him alone. And he would find out what you would do, and then he would respond in kind. We didn't know if the scene was funny or not. We didn't know how the impact of the scene, but we did the scene, and the director goes cut, and then they reshoot the scene, and the director goes cut, and he goes, the camera is shaking, and the crew would go, we can't stop laughing. Yeah. So right then I knew that the scene was going to be a hit.
yeah.
But if you see that episode, which is called Mr. Wu in the first season, there's a scene, a second scene that I'm very happier with, and that is in the meat locker, where Al and Wu come together, and he tells Wu, "I can only kill one guy. I can't be killing two, because if I kill two, the whole white community is going to string me up, much less you." And that rapport that we have, and that relationship that we have, I think summarizes what I always wanted to convey to people, is that we have integrity, we demand respect. We might look like fools, we might portray, but underneath we will we will fight, you know. And this carries on today, you know, this carries on today in our political history, how people think, you know, people mustn't underestimate other people,
Absolutely not.
you know. You mustn't underestimate people. And in this specific way, you mustn't like how the present administration underestimates China or Korea. They cannot underestimate them. They
Yeah.
are not they are not wimps.
Right.
They have a long culture, a long history, and a long study of mankind. So do not underestimate them. And that's what I wanted to convey in Deadwood, is that Mr. Wu should not be underestimated.
Should be respected.
Should be respected.
That's what it comes down to. I always tell people, I'm like, just respect people, man. You don't go wrong.
Well,
you know?
Well, what was great about it was we all respected each other on that set. And I think it has to do with the leadership. And leadership is always important. You know, the kind of leadership that you have is always important. And the leadership that we had in David Milch was not only great in the sense of the writing and the literate value, but in terms of the humanistic value. And here I go back again. You want to be a great performer? You can't unless you're a great human being. And David, the way he handled the whole company and his attitude and how he led us on the set, it provided us with an arena where we could challenge each other in a productive manner. You know, you hear all these stories about, oh, I hated that person in the ensemble, and I couldn't stand her, and we fought, but he provided a vision of that, to let people be creative, let people fight for their point of view, and see what we could come up with. Now, there was moments when David would say to you, "You're stupid." and you don't know how brutal it is when a guy like David Milch says, "That's dumb."
Yeah.
You know? But I mean, it was done with love.
Right.
You know?
I always tell people, if you have a brother and your brother's able to tell you when you're messing up, you know, that's like the best. You got to look out for each other that way.
Yeah, and you know, people can say that about Wally Burr as well. Because Wally would do that. I mean, he would tell you, like, no, do it this way. And he would tell you the line. Say it. But, you know, he had a respect for the craft. He had the love of he loved voice actors. Deep down, inherent in him. And he loved what he was doing. It was his craft, you know. So you respected that, you know.
Yeah.
Keone, do you feel that Deadwood was sort of the pinnacle of obtaining respect in your career? I mean, that's something that you strived for in terms of your peers, your community, your culture. Do you feel that that was the pinnacle role that you achieved that?
Respect, you mean?
Yes.
As a person, you mean?
As an actor. I mean, you talked earlier about striving for, you know, maintaining authenticity, maintaining respect, breaking racial typecasting. Do you feel that role did that?
Let me tell you, every actor worth his salt feels deep down within inside him that he still has flaws. That when people say you were great, you know different. That you would be a fraud if you did believe that you were perfect or you were great. I had an old time agent. His name was High Seeger. He comes from the days of Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, those days. And he would say to me, he said, the first thing you got to do in this business is get you some FU shoes, which meant make enough money to tell people F you. And that's the only respect that they understand.
Yeah.
You know? So on the one hand, yes, I agree with you. Yeah. You know, I it helped me get there. And on the other hand, yeah, you're right. You want people to respect your work and your value. But people in our industry, that's fleeting, you know, like, you know, one day they'll love you and the next day, who? Keone who? You know? So, I mean, you can't ever believe in false idols, which could be yourself, I guess, you know?
One of the things and you know, Keone, we talk a lot on the phone. You never settle. And that's one thing you've taught me, the importance of never settling, always striving for the next gig. That's great. I worked yesterday, but what am I doing tomorrow? You know?
And
Yeah.
the day after that, and the week after
And the
that.
week after that, I'm not thinking about yesterday. I'm not thinking about the job I did today. I'm thinking about what I need to do next week. And what is your advice to aspiring voice actors, aspiring actors that are watching this program to make it, to have that drive in the business?
Well, it's not rocket science, like they say. If you go to the gym and you see those guys that come in every day that are buffed, they go through their routine. They don't look happy doing it. They even might dread coming in, but they
Yeah.
know you want to be in shape. This is what you got to do. You don't eat sugar. You don't eat grains. You eat lean meat, lean protein, and a lot of vegetables. Shove it down your mouth and get back to that thing that you do.
100%.
So for you can talk about loving it, and I can tell you about all the great times that I've had and all the money I made and all the places I've been. But you have to do the things. It's a it's a practical and scientific uh, conflict that you're engaging in. You have to go to work. You have to keep working at it. You have to keep trying different things. You have to improve your craft. I mean, I studied opera. I can sing Italian. I can sing German.
It's
I,
amazing.
s- I studied languages. I studied Japanese. I studied Chinese. I studied Hawaiian. Uh, I studied music composition. I, I kept studying because it was the only way. It was my work, and I'm sure those guys at the gym, they're not like a happy camper when you see those guys come in at work. They look beat. They look like they hate it,
Yeah.
you know. And it can be that way sometimes. You have to fight through the tough part. It's easy to go and get recognition and go to the red carpet, but I mean, it's really the grinding part of this industry that you have to face full on nakedly, and ask yourself, is this something I want to really do?
Right.
There's a lot of rejection in my business too. Um, and there's a lot of people who can't take rejection. So you have to really build an understanding of those feelings of rejection and understand what that means. It's like playing poker. You don't win every day you play. But if you want to make a living of it, you have to play every day. So
Yeah.
that means a great amount of the time you lose. You walk away losing. But when you win, you have to make it really count. So, I like a lot of people advise me, like how do I make it as a voice actor? Well, it's not very difficult to understand, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. I'm still not satisfied. I still last week I worked on a Warner Brothers project, and I really had to work at it. The character voices I wasn't happy with. I had to really work at it. I
Yeah.
couldn't just come up with it like that. And
Yeah.
I'm just not that type of actor. And I was happy with the final end, but the process that I went through was brutal. Not to only mention, now that we have this COVID thing, a lot of us have to do the sound engineering in our home. We have to record in our home,
Right.
and it's brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, I studied, like Chekhov and Shakespeare. Never knew I had to study sound engineering. You
Right.
know,
Exactly. It's just something else other than voievoice.
it's like when
Acoustics and yeah.
when somebody tells you turn down your gain, and you're going like, what? My gain? What the heck? So it's like I had to get all these cables that I don't understand.
I love it.
Mic, a
So
mic system. I had to get connected with new apps on my computer in order to transmit my vocal recording. I had to find a space, a booth in my house. I'm
right.
recording in a closet now. I don't know where to put my towels and my linens. They're
That's how
all on my
He does it that way too.
right. So I'm recording in my closet, and it's like, it's brutal. It's not fun, and I dread it, but I have to do it. And why do I do it? because if you don't, it just goes away.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a creek that runs dry. You become just dead, and nobody remembers that creek was there.
Yeah. And how beautiful it was.
Yeah.
You know?
So I keep doing it. I keep fighting. I keep trying in order to, because I have a kid, and when I go, I want him to remember that I did it for him,
Yeah.
and for the people that I love, of course.
Yeah.
Keone, one thing I want to say is that, people travel hundreds of miles to see you at shows around the country, and many of them are G.I. Joe and Deadwood fans. What do you think made both series such a prevalent and long-lasting success, Deadwood being one of the top 100 TV shows made of all time?
Well, G.I. Joe came about, like I said, after Vietnam War, after struggle. And it was during the Reagan years. And it
Right.
was hopefully we would, it was like after World War II when Eisenhower came in, it was like the economy would start to propel itself and boost. People were moving out of the cities into suburbs. People were getting nice TVs. And they wanted entertainment that was closely akin to what was going on in their lives. And I think G.I. Joe was patriotic, yet it showed struggle. It showed uh, technological advancement. It showed creativity, and yet it showed conflict and contradiction that had to be resolved in one way or another, good versus evil.
Right.
And I think for young people, men especially, it gave them dreams about what could be. Now, Deadwood was a little different in the sense that it showed you our history, our true history uh, of how our country was founded. And we all know how our country was founded. And if we're really honest about it, you know, it, it falls on, it's based on the genocide of indigenous peoples,
Right.
So what psychology grew out of that? What psychology grew out of manifest destiny, that which we all carry in ourselves today? you know it was, yeah, it was great, but at the same time it was based upon a lot of uh contradictions. you know um how ruthless we had to be in order to survive. you know
It was like a daily thing. It wasn't just once in a while it came up.
right,
Literally
but
that.
it was people's dreams, but it wasn't in a kind of like a false way. It was more of a realistic way, and I think people were crying more for realism. I don't know if you remember NYPD Blue. In the first seasons of it, it showed corrupt cops.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know,
Is that Dennis Franz, right?
yeah, Sipowicz.
Well, that was
Sipowicz.
David Melch's first show, right? That was
Right.
what launched him to success.
Yeah.
Right. But I think what was happening was that people wanted to see reality as they knew it.
Right.
You know, so and I think it goes back and forth. In time. In times of prosperity, we really want these great, fun stories. But at the same time, when times are not that good and we face consequences, you want something that harkens to your psychology too, of
Yeah.
what you're going through. The struggle that we're going through every day, stuck in jobs that we don't like, and having to pay bills that we know ourselves are outrageous.
Yeah.
But we have to do it in order to survive. And how do we survive? What do we do? I think Al Swearingen is a great American. you know, and what can we take from that? Is the question. What can we take from that about
Right.
ourselves?
it's funny because it makes me think about like us, and you said this about the shows now. They really make us think about our morals and what we would do in certain situations. Like, for example, I always bring up Breaking Bad because I love that show, and it's not related, but I mean, what would you do if you were in that position, and how would your morals be, and what would put you, what would put your family on the right track? Do you look at your morals, or do you look after your family? And so,
Right.
you're right along that same vein. It's
Yeah.
completely makes sense. 100%.
Well, Deadwood, hands down, is one of the shows, along with The Sopranos, that actually drove TV to push forward with, more subconscious content for viewers. So, and
one thing I want to say about G.I. Joe, though, was that it took like people of color and women, it put them on the same plane, equal plane of each other. It's like, the women had as much power in their roles as Joe's.
Yep.
I mean, they gave orders and they took as well as they could, give.
Yep.
So, I mean,
races on there.
It was no question of femininity, it was a question of who could do the job.
Yep.
And so I think that in that way, Joe kind of broke out in that way. There was not, it was not a sympathetic, sentimental story. It was a story of people fighting for a cause,
standing up for what they believed in.
Right.
And this week, I don't think there could have been a better guest to have on
100,000%
to explain all this. And I feel that everything you've said today, Keone, is really given people sort of, like you said, sometimes we don't need to hear the positivity. We need to hear the understanding to reasoning behind why we're going through what we're going through. And I feel like you provided us that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we end the show, Keone, is there anything that you want to tell people on where they can find you? Anything to follow, things to plug?
No.
I know. Nery, go to the
I checked the questions, and unfortunately, he's covered everything. He's that great.
Is he that good? You know what? One thing we didn't cover. We didn't talk about Michael Gray.
Oh, Michael?
Yeah, he's actually watching right now.
He's watching.
Michael was a handsome, beautiful kid. I mean, it's like he was like a star, it's like so but he was I haven't seen him for 50 years, but I just remembered
I think he made comments.
He says I can't believe the last time we saw each other was on the pilot for room 222.
Right. But I can tell you it was not easy for me in Pasadena Playhouse. There was like about 250 students. I think I was the only person of color.
He says that I believe Keone had the most successful career than anyone in our class.
Well, I don't know about that. That's questionable. But anyway, let me just say this.
Modest.
One of our professors came out on stage the first day we were there, and he said, "Only one of you will make it." And I'm going like, I looked at everybody and I'm going like, is it going to be me? I don't think so, and I wouldn't be number one on that list because, like I said, I was the only person of color in that whole room. And it was like about 200, 250 people. But I said, okay, asshole, I'm going to show you. Whatever I do, I'm going to make something of myself.
That's awesome.
And people like Michael supported me and made me feel welcome in that community. So I loved him for that. And I will always remember him for that. There was a bunch of guys who did take me for what I was and didn't prejudge me. And I thought Michael was one of them. So, but anyway, there's just one thing I think I wanted to say was that, let me tell you about the cons. I really appreciate everybody who would come to the con and to come and talk to me. really deeply because um, we do not exist totally without someone else recognizing us, and appreciating us. So I do appreciate the people that came up to me, talked to me, and uh, and that's why I like doing the cons,
Yeah.
and particularly going to the different regions where I never would, and try and understand. Oh, this is how they act out in Arkansas. Oh, this is how they act in North Carolina. You know, this is how they. This is what this is. It really gives me an insight into people.
It's true. That's true. 100%.
Yeah, it does. It
It's
does.
funny because it's funny that you say that because I think Nery and I talk about this a lot, and especially with with clients, we go, oh yeah, in this city people are this way, and people don't understand that. Like when you act, I mean, even here in L.A. downtown, you go to downtown L.A., you go to West Hollywood, you go to Hollywood, you go to the
Yeah,
Valley. It's all different. Like
it's different. Yeah,
different, and,
I'm
and
gonna
and then
it's
huh?
interesting. It's interesting.
I'm gonna say one thing, and that's another thing for people that aren't watching. There's a lot of people that don't travel, and it's only until you travel that you really have an understanding for how people think. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't say tolerate it, but you have an understanding for them, and it puts you at ease for some of the mindsets, the ideals, the viewpoints that they may have. So I've really learned through the convention scene to be more comprehensive and understanding of other people,
and
and that's
open.
and open.
Yeah,
Yes.
that you see, that's the thing about being an actor is that you can't. A lot of actors are kind of dogmatic. That they think, okay, I've been this successful, I know what to do, I know how to do. But no, as you travel and get to meet people and talk to people, you find out, oh, really? Well, I
Yeah.
didn't know that. I didn't know that about myself, you know? And so like being at these places like in Augusta, in New Jersey, it's really opened my eyes. And I want to thank the people who were fans for that. That
Yeah.
I learned something too. I gained something too.
That's amazing. Hey, Nuri, Scott Zillner commented too. I think you should put that
Yeah, and we are hoping that you will make your appearance at Robo Toy Fest on December 13th in Pasadena. And Keone's also hoping that he'll get to meet you guys in Cincinnati. But of course, we're not sure what's going on yet, and we have no confirmation because of the epidemic. But we hope to see you all at an event really soon.
we Nuri, there's also one other one. Sorry, there's one other one I think you should bring up because it's really important. It's a fellow Cobra. Morgan commented, yes, our lovely Morgan loves you, Keone.
And then Peter Gould,
Well,
I just want to leave it on this, has loved your portrayal as Lieutenant Colonel Ellison Onizuka in the Challenger TV movie.
yeah, that was one of my most cherished roles. To play a guy from Hawaii who was my generation. Yeah, it was wonderful. And I just want to shout out to Scott and Morgan. I love you guys. You
Aw.
know, and Scott, thank you for all you do, Scott, for us.
Two
Love you, buddy.
outstanding people, by the way.
Huh?
Yes,
Two outstanding people. We
outstanding. And
they're both great people.
Amy wrote, "My son adored you and appreciated the time you took to talk with him," which
Aw.
which I assume was in either Raleigh or one of the Galaxy Cons.
Yes.
Now we're approaching the end of our show, but before we take off, Chris wants to remind you of a few things.
Do I? Okay, cool. All right, guys. There's going to be another CelebWorx Live weekly inside look into G.I. Joe. We'll be streaming live every Thursday at 5 p.m. unless otherwise announced. Our next guest for next Thursday will be our makeup show from a couple weeks ago. I'm sure if you guys tune in every week, I'm sure you remember it, but we had some technical difficulties with Michael Bell, but we're going to try it again this Thursday. We're going to try to do it. And just a reminder, also on Sunday is our regular show, our regular CelebWorx Live show. And we are going to have a really awesome person on this Sunday. His name is Bob West, and he is none other than Barney the Dinosaur. And we love him. So you don't want to miss.
Won't want to miss that at all.
Yes. So once again, in closing, I'm Christopher Arsaga, and you can follow me at The Real Arsaga. And in the words of Robin Williams from Good Will Hunting, you have bad times, but it'll always wake you up to the good stuff you weren't paying attention to.
And this has been Nery Lemus. You can follow me at The Real Nery Lemus on Instagram. Just leaving you with the quick reminder, always saying, with a quick saying that means a universal hello, goodbye, thanks for stopping, and stay safe always. Yo, Joe.
Yo, Joe. Thanks, Keone. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Keone. Thanks, everybody.
Be safe.
Love
everybody.
you guys.